The story of the Oregon football season after the blowout loss to Georgia is going to be defined by how they can respond. And what do you need to do that? We'll talk about that today. Here we go.
Are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, D1 play-by-play broadcaster and lifelong Oregon Ducks fan. Thank you for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, which is why, if you have not already, please like, comment, and subscribe wherever you are listening to or watching the show. I appreciate everybody out there who has done so already. Today's episode is brought to you by Upside. Download the free Upside app and use promo code LOCKED to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. And we are locked into the show today with Rian Winter at Sports Chat 503 on YouTube and on Twitter. He was down in Atlanta, so let us pray for the recovery of his soul, for he has seen the bludgeoning in person and will have to try and avoid them creeping into his nightmares, I'm sure, on a daily basis. But Ryan, even under these circumstances, it is good to talk to you once again, my friend.
Yeah, it's great to be on. Thanks so much, Spencer.
So this season now is going to be about how you bounce back from this. And look, Oregon has had season opening losses before: 2011 LSU, Boise State 2009, 2019 Auburn. There are probably other ones that I'm missing in there, perhaps, although typically you don't play an opponent at this level for your first game of the year. But those losses, even LSU, that got away from him in the third quarter with a couple of turnovers, really, but was otherwise competitive. None of those losses looked like this. Not even Boise State. It had the ugly aftermath with LeGarrett's punch and everything. We all remember that. But on the field, the score was 19-8. And in 2019 against Auburn, it was 21-20. And it was 40-27 the final against LSU in 2011. This was different. This was a bludgeoning down in Atlanta, unfortunately, where Georgia pulled their starters in the third quarter. We just haven't seen that in week one before. And to me, when I think about how Oregon is going to be able to bounce back and still have a successful 2022 season, which I think they can do, you can still win a conference championship. Pac-12 play hasn't even begun yet, so it's way too early to rule that out. But I think it's going to come down to leadership, not just from the coaches, but from the players as well. What do you think?
I would agree. I mean, anybody who's been on a team probably understands that, you're going to have wins, you're going to have losses, and sometimes losses will create wins in the future. And you got to look at it through the lens of, this might be a learning experience for them. And it was difficult. There were a lot of Duck fans down there. It felt like a bowl game. When you go to bowl games, they do feel different than regular season games. And it was a fun atmosphere, and then the game started and it got out of control quickly, and there was some PTSD from last year. It felt like, this again, it didn't really feel like you had a lot of growth. And so you're right. You need leadership during these times where it feels like maybe this wasn't the team that you thought you were going to have. Well, let's maybe try if we can rebuild it to the team that we thought we would have had. Losing Popo before, made I guess, a difference as well. You got to give a shout out to him a little bit, but
this was done for the season. Such a bummer, man.
I know. And that will take the wind out of your sails a little bit, but this was a team that was expected to do better on defense this year and be better on offense. And instead, you saw the exact opposite of both. And you're right. I think that there needs to be some leadership. I would look to Sean Dollars on offense. This is a guy who you mentioned before we jumped on about this idea. He's a guy who I mentioned right away early in the year and season preview and stuff that I thought he was going to have a big year this year. Coming back off the injury, he's seen a lot of football. He's rehabbed. He's been around the program a long time. He's a smart player. He's a good player. And, you'd assume that this would be a big year for him. And maybe it is, but maybe his best role could be in that leadership position. There's a lot of young guys as well, and you never know who the leader is. It doesn't have to be about age. And especially on a team like this, where you have a lot of really good young talent, they can step up and really kind of hold the torch for this team. So it's got to be somebody. It's hard to ask that of a walk-on. And I think some people look to the quarterback as being that leader right out of the gate. And that's not always the case. This is a veteran offensive line that can hold this thing down. You've got tight ends in that room. You get Cam McCormick on that team, who's one of the oldest players in college football. I mean, you've got veteran leadership. I don't think that's the problem. I think that you faced a incredibly good Georgia team, and you really have to tip the cap to them. And you didn't play as an Oregon team. You just didn't play anywhere near your capability or what we would assume the capability is, because we're still going on projection. We're still going on assumption. And we don't really exactly know what this team is. And this week won't really show it either. It'll really be that week 3 against BYU. And I think this season could be a real nail biter.
I wonder the sort of leadership position Bo Nix has in the locker room. He's a starting quarterback, but for the guys who were on the team last year or have been for several seasons,
Sure.
they don't know him very well. He's only been there since I actually don't know exactly when he arrived to campus. I know the transfer was
Spring.
announced in December. So yeah, I think he
Yeah,
arrived
January, February.
sometime in the spring. But Sean Dollars had a quote the other day after practice. He was talking to the media members about leadership and the importance of that and bouncing back after a loss like what the Ducks suffered Saturday down in Atlanta. And he talked about the 2019 season. And that was a year that featured a high-profile game at a neutral site against Auburn, one that Oregon should have won. That was how it was very different from this Georgia game. You should not have won this game. No one really thought we were going to win going into it, but you should have won that Auburn game, and still you showed well and competed, but came up short in crucial moments. And Dollars talked about the leadership of guys like Justin Herbert, of guys like Troy Dye, who were experienced, were veteran presences. I don't even know what the plural of. They had a number of guys who had a veteran presence. How about that? How about we pluralize it that
Beautiful.
way? And I'll just stop talking here momentarily to save all of you out there. But it was important to have those guys in the locker room. You have to show it from the coaches, right? The coaches have to be able to continue to motivate players, keep them thinking forward, keep them focused on getting better. And based on Dan Lanning's comments, it seems like that has been the mindset in the locker room. But who do you think some of those leaders are? Dollars has been there for a while, but he also hasn't played a ton in his career. What players would you look to on this roster when I say individual players who are going to have to be leadership voices throughout this 2022 season?
Well, you've got to look to, again, it can be the veterans. It could be a guy like Bennett Williams, who's seen a lot of football on the defensive side. A guy like Mace Funa has been around. He's, now kind of looking at it from a father's perspective. And, even guys, who are fairly new, but who are now getting their chance. A guy like Dante Manning. I mean, this is a really interesting situation. I tend to think that the team thrives off of being able to run the ball. I've always thought that football is a ground sport, and you want to put it through the air, and the game has changed, but it really felt like Oregon's identity. There was no real offensive identity. The way that they rushed the ball, they were able to run, they were able to get yardage against Georgia.
4.5 yards a carry. Yep.
They were able to move the ball a little bit, and they had a lot of guys carry the ball. I mean, there were four or five carries almost for everybody.
Yeah.
And so I really liked the way that they moved around, and it felt like this was almost not to be like a conspiracy theorist or something, but it felt like this was a game where they just kind of wanted to see what they had, and they knew that they weren't really going to be in this thing. They knew that this thing could get away from them in a hurry, and they were. That seems strange because they didn't go with the other quarterbacks, but a lot of wide receivers got the ball. They spread the ball around on the wide receiver side, and they spread the ball around on the running backs. You know what you have up front. They didn't move around that much there. You know what you have pretty much defensively with the linebackers and what. They spread it around a little bit. Guys got some run. But you got to look to the guys who are going to lead this team. It's got to be Noah Sewell and Justin Flo in the middle, man. Those guys are freaking apex predators. That's got to be the number one thing on the defense. And, we thought the scheme would be so much better. It was just a disappointing game. Didn't have to just keep going back to this, but I did a live stream at halftime as like a cathartic session. I was like, what in the hell is going on here? Because we just wanted a good game. We wanted to give the SEC the respect of going down there and playing a game that was worth playing. This was a game that wasn't worth playing at this point. Having a score like this, I've watched the tape twice. There's like 7 redeeming plays. Out of the whole thing, it feels like that you can really take and be like, good job, execution everywhere. Oregon's got athletes. Oregon should be able to win a lot of games this year in the Pac-12 based on just talent alone. It's just whether or not they can make it work with the scheme and with the coaches and with the gelling. There's going to be so many different tag words for the excuse lines of what this problem is with the Duck team this year if they continue to struggle. I do think they'll put it back together, and I think they're going to beat BYU. I think BYU could beat Baylor this weekend, and Oregon could beat BYU, and all of a sudden people are thinking, okay, Oregon's not that bad. Put them back in the rankings at 15, 20, somewhere in there, and then say, hey, let's just see where they go for the Pac-12 season. If they win the Pac-12, what was the Pac-12 North, if they do really well in the Pac-12, only will lose 1 or 2 games, then this Georgia game doesn't taste that bad at the end of the year. But if they continue to struggle, this Georgia game is just going to be like a huge cloud over not only the program, but our national kind of a prestige that we've kind of tried to build over the last decade or so.
Yeah, I think for this particular season, it'll be something that hangs on the minds of fans is they'll, just go back and ask themselves, like, if the Ducks really sputter this year and go like 6-6, the Duck fans might look back and I'd understand it and say, so if we hadn't played Georgia, would it have been that bad? Like, was that too
Right.
much of a gut punch? But that's why I'm coming on here and talking about leadership because that's what you need in a time like this. You have to be able to keep guys driven, focused, and wanting to get better. It comes from the coaches. It's got to come from the players too. But I think it's the most important element of what will define Oregon's season this year. We know the talent on the roster. We've talked about it at length here on the show. There's no questions about that. I've got
Yeah.
more questions
And,
though
and,
that I want. Oh yeah, go ahead and finish
and
that.
Dan Lanning said the same thing today at the press conference. He said he wasn't that impressed with the effort. He needs more energy. They need more attention to detail, all those things. So, yeah, you're completely correct.
Yeah, and I've got more questions to ask Ryan about, at what point should we maybe be worried? I don't think the time is right now. I think, having our attention or a mild concern is warranted, but at what point should that come? Full on worry? We'll get to that after I tell you this episode is brought to you by Upside. From cringing at the pump to getting an eye-popping check at your favorite restaurant, inflation is hitting us all where it hurts. I don't know about you, Ryan, but every time I go to the grocery store or fill up my car with gas, I'm just reminded, hey, maybe there's a reason they're talking about this inflation thing all the time. It is really bad and it really hurts. That's why I started using Upside. Upside is an incredible app for anyone who buys gas, groceries, or dines out. Any of those apply to you? Think about it. With every purchase, I'm earning cash back thanks to Upside. To get started, download the free Upside app, use my promo code LOCKED, and get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. That's the free Upside app on Google Play or the App Store. Promo code LOCKED to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. Go check out Upside and start saving yourself money today. So Ryan, I'm not, full on worried. I think my overall mood as we're now recording this Wednesday night, dropping on Thursday after that Georgia game, and had a chance to let it settle in, which is important, right? You don't want to, remember how you're feeling right when the game ends because that's, it's fresh. You got to let things settle, play out, and then be able to kind of calmly, coolly go and analyze. And the feeling that I'm consistently having is mild concern. Not worry, not panic, but like I expected them to be better in that game. They should have been better in that game. Oregon does not have as talented of a roster as Georgia, but it's not a 49-3 talent gap, right? I mean that's coaching, and
I
maybe
would
that
hope
Georgia
not.
staff is just that good, just that smart. They did, no pun intended with Kirby Smart, but they did, for those of us that forgot, just win a national championship and beat Nick Saban to do so. The list of coaches that have beaten Nick Saban in national championship games is it Dabo Sweeney, Nick Saban, I'm sorry, Kirby Smart. Am I missing anyone? I think that's pretty much it for Bama losing in national championship games. So it's a really good, smart staff, and that's clearly an area of growth we have to watch for right now. But as this season goes on, it could turn into worry. I don't think it will. But at what point, Ryan, would you look at the way things are playing out on the field and say, "Okay, I'm worried not just about this year, but about how the year is going to, or how the years could play out to come."
That's a good question. I was talking to a lot of Georgia fans while I was down there, and they were all saying, hey, every good coach struggles early, and don't be afraid of this season being a little blip on the radar. You guys have good talent. He recruits well. A lot of the praise from the Georgia fan base about Dan Lanning and company. And so I think Oregon will be fine. I think Oregon will be fine this year. I just think that Georgia's that much better. I don't know if they're 49-3 better. You're right. But I do think that they are significantly better. And I think they're going to put it on the whole SEC this year. I think they're going to get tested every once in a while. They will be, but I think their schedule looks pretty clean until they get to Bama in the SEC championship. And that's where we're at right now with college football. I think these teams are so elite. They are at the absolute pinnacle of success that it's really difficult for anybody else to compete with them, even teams ranked in the top 10. I still think would get absolutely served by this Bama team or this Georgia team or this Ohio State team right now. I think that Ohio State Notre Dame game, I think, was said a lot of about Notre Dame. I think that there's an opportunity for these schools to kind of be a part of it, but at the end of the day, I think there's only room for those top three right now. And the fourth team is just a team to get beat in the college football playoff, and we'll see which SEC school wins it this year. And that might be a little boring for college football fan base, but I still think it's a great season. I still think you live and die by your team, and you support your team, and each week you have a new opportunity to go and do that. And whether or not you get to the football playoff or not, whatever. I've always thought it's better to go to a bowl game in San Diego sometimes than better than, that Holiday Bowl is awesome, man. So to me, there's something to be said about this season. It's not a wash just because you lost this game. I tend to think that it's a real struggle if you lose to BYU early. If you go 1-3 to 1-2 to start the year out of that first three games, and you're looking at that a Washington State game on the road, that's always a dangerous place to play. Washington State's going to be tricky this year. They didn't look great last week either, but I still think that this Eastern Washington game is going to give you something because Eastern Washington is a good team. They're ranked 11 in the FCS. They're a quality program across the board. They still have to rebuild. I was talking with some Eastern Washington. I have some friends of mine who are Eastern Washington guys, and they're saying they have to rebuild, and that's fine. But I think Oregon has to rebuild. I don't think Oregon is maybe where the fans' expectation was, and I think that's kind of hard pill to swallow if you're an Oregon fan because you're thinking, no, they are. The recruiting, we've already talked about all those reasons. I think we might have hyped ourselves up a little bit to talk about all those reasons why Oregon's so good, and then you get to a schedule where you're like, well, you know what? The other teams are playing well too. So Eastern Washington should be a good maybe 2-3 touchdown win. And you get to BYU. I think they can beat BYU. And I think they can do well in the Pac-12 this year. But I'm expecting if you see this kind of expectation that first week, it's going to change. Your perspective is going to change. It's bound to happen. So then you're thinking maybe if they were going to lose, we talked about this before the season started, maybe they lose 1 or 2 games. Well, maybe now your expectation is they lose three or 4 games. And now you're talking about maybe having a 5-loss year or a 4-loss year, which is that terrible for Oregon Duck fans? Maybe for some, because some have such high expectations they can't accept any of that loss. But there's other good teams out here. I still think UCLA is going to be a problem for Oregon. I still think the Beavs are going to be a problem. We know Utah. So, and Washington is always going to bring it. So you don't have any cupcakes. And you haven't played, like we talked about, you didn't play Cal well. You haven't played Arizona well down there. You haven't played, maybe Colorado is the only gimme on the whole schedule at this point.
You might be right. You might be right that you might be right that Colorado feels like the only gimme at
but that's going to be a tough game too up at Boulder.
It can be, yeah. Though that one's a little later in the year, and I think by that point Colorado could have 1 win or less, and they could be.
Colorado does not look good, right?
No, I was not high in them coming into this season,
Right.
And over on Locked On Pac-12, I got a little pushback from Buffs fans who have since softened their tone after their season opener against TCU, where they didn't score a touchdown at home. Oregon didn't score a touchdown on the road against a team that will be in the college football playoff more than likely at the end of the year. Colorado didn't score a touchdown at home. Again, like that's the equivalent for them of Oregon if they didn't score a touchdown against BYU. Like if we don't score a touchdown against BYU, okay, that's major problems. That's like, okay, let's just try and keep it over 500.
And that's a great question as well. It's like, what are your expectations for the defense? What are your expectations for the offense? I've always thought, and we as Duck fans have always thought we could score our way into any game. So now maybe the problem is the offense. And now you're going to need the defense to hold teams down just so you can score 21 points. to 30 points, maybe your threshold. I don't know. I'd like to see it. I mean, if they put it on Eastern Washington and score 50 piece on them, maybe our expectations change, but this is going to be a week-to-week thing. I think there's going to be more nail-biters than blowouts this year, so that'll be fun, though. Every year is different. You got a brand new coach. You got a brand new coaching staff. They're starting to gel with this thing. I do think the coaching staff will stick around a little bit. You're going to have movement. You always have movement. But I think the top end of the coaching staff stick around a little bit because you're not going to have overnight success. You're not going to have a huge push to steal those guys. And two, I think they're young enough to say, hey, let's stick this thing out and let's see if we can do this thing.
Let's go to that Eastern Washington game a little bit, and then we'll close with everybody's favorite player, Bo Nix. I expect he's already there. Just coming into this season and talking to the Auburn people, they were just all telling me the same thing. Like, dude, get ready for your fan base to split and for them to
Yeah,
just be
they all did. You're right.
nuts on this guy, and we were right about that. But the Eastern Washington game, look, if Oregon's going to have a successful season, I think it does start this week. It starts in earnest against BYU because that'll be a better test. But this week, I think, is an attitude check. And against an FCS opponent, you should put up a score with the talent that Oregon has, regardless of a new coaching staff or not. You should put up a score like what Georgia did to Oregon last week. I mean, I'm expecting a 25-plus point victory. I mean, if this game is close or, not close enough to where we could actually see Ty Thompson or Jay Butterfield or whoever the backup quarterback is in the fourth quarter, that to me is not a full-on red flag, but maybe like the flag is peeping up over the screen a little. I'm like, look, yes, it's a good FCS school, but a good FCS school should only be able to compete with an FBS team that is way, way down. Last year, 2 FCS teams beat Pac-12 schools. Washington went 4-8. Arizona went 1-11. Those are the sorts of teams that play close games with and or lose to FCS schools. And by the way, I have no idea what to make of Washington State now. I like them coming into this year. They look terrible. That was a bad start, and they're going to go play at Wisconsin, and they could get absolutely waxed in Madison. But that's a conversation for another day. If you're Oregon from an attitude perspective, if you have the right mentality, the leadership that we were talking about to start today's show, this game should never be close. I'm not saying not close at the end the way UCLA beat Bowling Green a week ago. They were losing in that game, came back to win by 28. That's not what I want to see. You should be coming out from the first snap, and you should be taking it to Eastern Washington, and the final score of this game should be like 38-10.
Right. I would agree. I think you need to put it on them. I think there's no room for error. I think you need to treat this game as a serious get-right game where, you might not, everybody's trying to embarrass their opponent, but you're trying to put this on the scoreboard. You're trying to make some hay here, and you have to. I think from this point out for the next maybe 2 or 3 years, I think Oregon's going to have to really do some serious things to get back into the national conversation. I think they're going to have to literally win every single game to even be in the anywhere conversation for the national championship. But I think that they have to be, just for national prominence sake, and for this whole idea about the conference realignment, it couldn't come at a crazier time, right? So I think Oregon needs to jump on immediately. I think they need to take advantage of these wash. I mean, last week, Tennessee State, they scored 19 points in the first quarter on these guys. I think if Oregon can score 2 or 3 touchdowns right out of the gate, starts going. You want to be able to be up on halftime. You want to be able to be partying at halftime a little bit, have Ty Thompson play a tremendous amount, have Jay Butterfield play as much as you need to play, whatever the case may be. Talk about Ty Thompson, talk about Bo Nix. I was frustrated that they didn't see any action, that Ty or Jay didn't see any action in the last week's game. And, you had such a blowout. The other team had taken their starters out. You got to do that. I don't know. This could be a situation where they just try to play strong arm on the thing. You would assume if they're playing Eastern Washington, they're up 2 touchdowns, that you're going to see the other quarterback. But it could be a weird situation where Dan Lanning might want to just play that the way that maybe he just wants to play it, and the rest of us don't want it to be that way. But I do think that Eastern Washington, the season starts now. It started last week, obviously, but that's a wash. It starts now in earnest next week, though. I think that this has to be a tune-up game for them, because if they play anywhere near the way that they played against Georgia, even with the talent discrepancy, if they play the same way they played against Georgia, they're going to get waxed in some of these games against these teams, especially a team like BYU. BYU is going to bring it physically. The point of attack, BYU, is always how they stay in games. They might not have the speed. They might not be able to break you over the top, but their quarterback play has been great.
Yep.
Their offensive line are always good. Their defensive line is always good. They always have good tight ends. They always have some speed receiver. It's just a really, really dangerous situation for the Ducks right now to go to this Eastern Washington game because they're dangerous on their level. There's no room for error. You have to absolutely obliterate this team, and that's going to be a tough thing to do. And then you have to go play BYU at home, showcase game for them. They are absolutely going to be circling the dogs against Oregon, and Oregon has to really show up against these two teams now. So I think the energy will be fine. These guys are able to flush it a lot easier than the fans are. It's always proven. The players can move on much, much faster than the fans. Here we are on a Wednesday night still talking about it. The players have already moved on, man. They're already thinking about something else. They were already thinking about the Popeyes chicken after the game. They'd already moved on to that. They're like, where's the post-game meal? And if you're in Atlanta, you're eating Popeyes or a Waffle House. I mean, I felt like I gained 15 pounds down there. I was down there for like 5 days.
That just means you're enjoying yourself, man. I mean, when you
Yeah.
go on trips like that, live it up. Like the point of
Let it
life is
roll.
to enjoy it, right? Like isn't that why we're all here?
Here's what we need. We need Locked On Waffle House because the Waffle House is the greatest sports radio you would ever hear. Everything was calm. Everything was calm. Two waffles, two eggs, whatever. As soon as they heard we were there for the game, the sports fan, all they heard was college football. It was on. Like somebody just lit a match and the thing completely lit up. Everybody was talking about everybody else. Boom. Everybody's talking over. It felt like Stephen A. Smith. I mean, it was amazing. So think about that in the future. A little collab with Waffle House with Locked On. And you might have a little something on your plate there. By the way, the moment I walked in the Waffle House, my feet were stick to the floor almost. A little bit of
That's
syrup.
the only way. That's the only way to
A little bit of
consume it,
syrup in
isn't
there.
it? That's getting the full experience. I'll run that potential Waffle House partnership.
Yeah, just run up the pole.
Up the chain a little bit. See if there's any appeal for some crossover. Closing thoughts on Bo Nix, what you saw from him, and look, I didn't think he was amazing, but I didn't think he was horrible. People were saying, oh, bench him and just put Ty Thompson. I'm like, no, and I hear the frustration on Ty or Jay didn't even get to play in this game, but on the flip side, Bo's incorporating himself into a new offense. You kept the starters out there for a while, the receivers and tight ends. He's trying to develop chemistry with those guys. I think that's how they were probably looking at it, is these are live game reps and we need as many as we can because Bo is the guy who's going to give us the best chance going forward. Look, he wasn't incredible, but I don't think Ty or Jay would have been any better than he was. One interception was bad. One of them was really not. I don't know why Seven McGee is getting that one-on-one shot. I like Seven, but not for that particular play.
Yep.
Like where's Thornton or Franklin or Chris Hudson to run that route like a natural receiver? But what did you think of Bo Nix and how he performed in week 1?
Yeah, I think it's a little overblown of how terrible he was. He's always been like this. I think the Auburn fans, you nailed it. They said you're going to have the good Bo, you're going to have the bad Bo, you're going to say Bo no. And the SEC.
Oh, hold on, Kenny Dillingham, the coordinator cam, and him going Bo.
I know. So good.
I felt
he should have his own Locked On. He is a tremendous guy on the microphone.
He's a big personality. Big personality. But anyway, keep going.
Bo, the SEC fans, they really do not like him, and I think, the Georgia fans, the Southern hospitality is real, but they really didn't like him. They came up with about 1,000 different creative nicknames of how to say Bo Nix. They've done it 1,000 different ways, many of them incredibly vulgar. But the ideology is that this is a guy who's he is who he is. And he hasn't really developed maybe into the quarterback that people thought he was going to be. He came in at a time where he played pretty well as a freshman, and he really hadn't put up the numbers since then. He's had some injuries, some other sort of stuff, different coordinators, different coach, whatever the case may be. But, he goes out there, he leads the team in rushing. I mean, that's one of the things I saw was like, where is this pro style offense where they're throwing over the top, all this other sort of stuff, and the fast offense? There was a couple of times where they went tempo, but where's this pro style thing? Because to me, it looked like a lot of the stuff we saw last year, a lot of the stuff where you're seeing some quarterback runs, you're seeing some window dressing where you're going one way and you're faking it to go the other way, and you go the other way with no blockers. There's some weird stuff there where I didn't understand necessarily where they were going. So There were some drop passes. There were some key times where you throw the ball to the wide receiver drops it immediately, or the running back as the flanker right out of the gate, throwing it to Bucky, and just losing it. Those are the things that lose momentum, and you can't blame all that on Bo. Yeah, he might have put the ball a little too much mustard over the middle, but still, you got to be able to catch those balls. That's what you're there for. The 7 McGee play, on my channel, I said, it was kind of a gimme play by the cornerback. It wasn't. It was a great play by the corner, but my
It's an
point on that
unbelievable
was
play.
7 was on the ground. I mean, 7 had already tripped up by that point. It was, meaning it was a gimme play, but it was just wide open. All he had to do was react to the ball. I agree with you. You got a guy like Dante Thornton on the team who's that tall, runs that fast. Why would you not have him run that seam route? I just don't see that with 7. I like 7 more in the flat or coming across the middle or whatever the case may be. But then the other thing was the second interception was mind-blowing. I in the stadium, it was kind of hard for me to see exactly what happened there, but because it happened so quickly, and your perspective is different when you're in the stadium versus watching it on live. And so I rewatched it a couple different times right away, and to me, it looked like it was a regular setup screen pass, and all of a sudden he's throwing to Patrick Herbert, who looks like he was blocking. It looked like there was a massive communication there. So
it was a fake screen.
it was a fake screen, but
they'd run that bubble concept out of the quad bunch look to a side. They'd run that a couple times. They faked that screen, and then they have guys release up the field. But you had Patrick Herbert, and I don't remember who the other receiver or tight end was. They were running in the exact same spot. It was a broken play. It was an easy read for the safety.
Wasn't given a target at all. He was just running. It felt like
that was weird.
That was a weird play. And they were in a zone where the guy just picked the thing immediately. He just ran right at the ball. Plus, we know from watching the Auburn tape that when Bo gets picked, he does telegraph. He locks it. Speaking of locked on, he locks on his receiver and he throws that thing, and everybody in the whole arena knows he's going to throw there. So it's a really interesting thing. 21 completions. They moved the ball around. They just didn't score. They were able to run the ball more against Georgia than the average team was last year. They were still able to throw the ball. They were able to get first downs. They just freaking shot themselves in the foot at really inopportune times. It wasn't like they were going to win, but they probably should have scored about 15 to 20 points. I mean, you should have at least, especially the last play. I mean, that last touchdown you should have had in garbage time at least. That makes it 10 points. I mean, you should have at least shown up somewhere in the end zone. You didn't. And so you can't put that all on Bo, but I understand where the fans still have this discussion. I did 2 hours of a live stream last night, Spencer, where we talked about this thing over and over and over from all these guys' perspectives of, is it time for Ty Thompson? I said, I thought we put that to bed last year.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Here it comes again. And I think you're going to have that until, 1, you give him the chance to play, or 2, you just start winning with Bo.
Rian Winter at Sports Chat 503 on Twitter and on YouTube. We always appreciate the insight and the commentary. One of my favorite guests to have on the show. One of the guest favorites as well. They tend to like you out there, Ryan, which is why we keep bringing you back, and I like you too, I guess.
Appreciate you, man. Well, hey, today was my first day of school with students. My voice is a little rough, telling those kids to get off the cell phone for the first time all summer. But no, I really appreciate you, Spencer. Again, very proud of what you do with Locked On Ducks and with Locked On Pac-12. Keep doing your thing. Not to mention your actual full-time job that you do. D1.
Well, it's another job. It all kind of blends together now, and it's about 50-50 split at this point in time. But I'm good with that.
The amount of time I know the fall is a heavy one on your voice. Let's just put it this way.
Yes, it is. We keep it up. That's why I'm drinking water and tea all day long. But we love having you back.
You should have some sort of lozenge be the sponsor.
Eventually, at some point, your voice has just got to be able. You just got to be able to take it. You got to be able to do a double header broadcast and then
do a podcast the same day.
There'll be days this year where I do 2 broadcasts in a day for play-by-play and 2 podcasts. That's plenty of talk. That's enough talking for me here today. I appreciate everyone listening. See you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.